And off we go. Hey, how are you doing, Udi?
Very good. Thank you, Steph. How are you?
I am good. I was just saying before we started, I'm just wearing my new hoodie, which was a shout out to Ren and my team who snatched this for me, which has got our department on it, and it's very comfy and it's a very funky hood. I won't keep it up for the whole time, but it's like a bright orange hood, if you can see. So I wore this a lot when I was not here last week on our team offsite. So So I hope everyone had a good time last week without me. Hopefully the show was good with Biddle. But Udi, where do we find you? Because you're not at home, are you?
No, I'm traveling. I'm actually in Seattle at Amazon headquarters here in Seattle for meetings. Been here for 3 days, ready to go home.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I was there last week, and Seattle's nice. I do like it, but the jet lag was a killer. I think for me going over there, I didn't sleep longer than maybe 4 hours a night, which was very stressful. But yeah, okay, let's get into it. So welcome everyone to the Keys to AWS Optimization, the show where we share stories, concepts, and solutions to help you unlock your spend at AWS. My name is Stephanie Gooch. I am a commercial architect, and I've been here almost 2 years now. Time is flying by, and I focus specifically on anything to do with cloud financial management and optimization with customers. And that's why we have this show for you guys, so we can share our knowledge, bring in specialists like Udi to talk about different topics. So throughout the show, if you have questions, comments, please feel free to put them in the chat. If you're watching this on YouTube, then please pop questions on there. Give us a like and subscribe, and let us know if there's any subjects you want us to cover. So Udi, do you want to give a bit of a background, give us your kind of 1 minute origin story?
Sure. Very, very briefly, I'm a go-to-market specialist for Amazon DynamoDB at AWS. Go-to-market specialist means, in layman's terms, business development manager in most companies. I've been with AWS now for 3.5 years, mostly in the AI space. I'm based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, therefore traveling. And before AWS, I was actually for years and years in startups. I founded several companies
Oh,
in
wow.
the space, and I find my new home in AWS, and very happy for it.
Good. Hopefully enjoying your new space in here. So as you may have guessed, as the title and also what role he plays, we're talking about DynamoDB, which is exciting because this is going. We haven't done a deep dive on a proper service in a while, so this is exciting. So throughout the episode, we're going to be chatting a bit about what it is, NoSQL, and how you can optimize it based on some exciting announcements that happened at reInvent. So let's set the scene. Basic question: what is DynamoDB?
That would be a good place to start. So, you'd be surprised how often I'm asked that question, even by a lot of AWS folks, because we have such a broad portfolio of purpose-built databases that it's sometimes a little bit difficult to figure what's what. So let me
Yeah.
try to kind of put things in place. Amazon DynamoDB is a fast and flexible NoSQL database service for single-digit millisecond performance at any scale. DynamoDB is designed for very high performance transactional workloads or transactional applications like payments, fraud detection in financial services, user profile changes in web applications, shopping cart and inventory updates in retail, or storing media, streaming bookmarks and watch lists in media and entertainment. And it has very broad application. Now, if you need an easy way to remember DynamoDB, it's the fast one. All right. So we got 17. I'm trying to really not dumb it down, but really simplify it. And organizations
Yeah.
all over the world are migrating actually from traditional relational databases and other NoSQL databases to take advantage of this low latency, high throughput for modern applications. So that's basically what DynamoDB is all about in a nutshell.
Cool. I'll remember that now. It's the fast one. And that explanation of when to use it with storing the streaming content is something that we'll jump back to, which I referenced in the blog I wrote where we started our conversation. So we started talking when I started putting the reInvent announcements blog into practice. So I'll share that. But that's kind of my favorite example. And I actually use that as an example when explaining to my parents what I was writing about, because I was like, when you use a streaming service so I think that's a really good example to kind of give to people. So you mentioned NoSQL.
Yeah.
And again, this might be something people aren't familiar with. So do you want to give a bit of background of what that actually means?
Yeah. So thanks for that. So DynamoDB is part of a family of databases called NoSQL, or non-relational. And it sounds like a scary word, but what it really means is two things that might be the kind of the key takeaways. First of all, NoSQL is simply a model of storing and retrieving data that is not tabular. If you think of relational databases, it's essentially tables, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's tables with columns and rows, and they are highly normalized for the data they store. What that actually means, also to simplify this, relational databases were really developed at a time where storage for digital data was super, super expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, there was a tabular model, like small tables that connect to each other through keys, that were really normalized and very, very efficient at storing data. No duplicates, very strict schema. But guess what? The world has changed. We don't need that anymore. It's not really that important. And what's really costing a fortune today, or not a fortune, but it's costing way more than storage, is compute. And
Mm-hmm.
the applications, the explosion of data, users running applications. What's really important today is to have data models stored somewhere and accessed frequently that that are optimized for compute, not for storage. And that's where the story of NoSQL comes in. Where you have essentially all sorts of different data models, like a graph, or storing documents, or storing, like DynamoDB is key value relationships. Very simple. There's a key and there are attributes associated with it. Super simple, right? The other thing to remember is that with relational databases, you basically are focused on, this is my data, I'm going to throw it in somewhere, right? It's going to be super optimal for storage, great. But later I'm going to build applications and they'll be able to access this data any other way.
Right.
NoSQL, it's kind of working backwards. You're saying, how am I going to access my data? And based on how I'm going to access it, I'm going to choose which NoSQL data model. Am I going to choose a graph, a time series NoSQL database, a document, or a key value, or others? So it requires thinking, what does my application do? And not so much what kind of data I need to store. That's the difference.
No, yeah, that's really interesting. I'm gonna, again, as always, guys, I'm not gonna pretend that I'm an expert in all the things that we talk about on this show. This is why I have guests on. DynamoDB is something I've only had brief contact with in my old job and a little bit at AWS. So the whole hearing the words key value, you might recognize that from things like tags. That's something that we can like process into how we normally think about things. So no, that was a great kind of explanation. So before we jump into the optimization part of it, was there anything you wanted to cover about the benefits and the not I don't want to say the cons, the pros and cons to using it, or are you set where we are?
Yeah, you know, one thing that's important to understand. So we talked about NoSQL. And since NoSQL and its data modeling approaches is, you know, it's really not hard to figure out. It's actually quite simple. In fact, I think it's simpler than relational databases. But it's new. It's new to most people. And so we do hear from people that they don't know how to do certain things that they're very familiar with doing it with relational databases, like how to model data, or how to optimize for cost. So for example, for storage. So it's just new and requires some learning. And what we've done is we've started developing a series of features into DynamoDB that help our customers optimize for cost very easily, so they don't have to figure everything out.
Nice. Okay, we can see why we brought him on. So also we've had some people join on the stream. So if you're wondering what we're talking about DynamoDB today, and Udi is here as an expert to kind of chat us through. So we're going to dive into the optimization. Just as you were saying, this is new, and like how complicated relational databases are. I couldn't help think back to my master's when I was doing IT, and I was just like remembering the database section. I was like, I wonder when they will update it to include NoSQL. Who knows? I should go back and ask them and see if they can. Okay, so why we're all here, let's talk about cost optimization. Do you want to lead with the new announcement that was done at reInvent?
Yeah, we actually had a very exciting announcement because it was the first time that we introduced the concept of table classes into DynamoDB. And the first new table class that we introduced is called infrequent access table class. And it actually kind of spells out what it really means. What infrequent access table class is, it's basically a way of storing data that is less frequently accessed. You can think of old social media blogs or posts, old blogs, old news items. Things tend to have less value, or at least less frequently accessed over time. Even storing banking transactions, payments, retail orders, right? Anything that you can think of that over time you may want to access once in a while to see what you've done in the past, but that data has a perception of lower value and it mounts up over time. It's just you're building more and more and more of it. So what we wanted to do is for tables that actually have more storage than access in terms of kind of the usage pattern, we wanted to flip the cost around so that we can be much more efficient on behalf of our customers. So the infrequent access table class basically provides a up to 60% lower cost on storage for that infrequent access data, whatever it may be, across industries.
I mean, 60% saving. That's a big one. Well, you definitely mentioned this on our reInvent special episode that we did, and there were many great announcements, but this was one of my favorites. And just so everyone knows, if you want to look at any of our old episodes, it's on YouTube on the Keys Database Optimization, just to throw that out there. But yeah, the example that you told me on the phone, which is what I mentioned at the start, is I'll say it's your example, but the idea of this, like, and you can correct me if I'm saying it wrong. So it's the idea that, say you're on a streaming service, you started a TV show, you got, 10 minutes in, you decide to go watch something else.
Right.
In like a year's time, if you want to go back to that 10-minute section you've already watched, you want that streaming service to remember that you've watched that 10 minutes. You don't want to be like, oh, it's forgotten where I've gotten to. And so that's the kind of data that's like less important, because clearly you didn't like that show, whatever it was. And so it's less likely you're going to watch it.
Right. And if you're anything like me, watching 7 different shows at the same time, then you want to be able to have a watch list created as a result of looking into this, looking into that, exploring different things, looking at different trailers. And so the way to think about NoSQL in general, and specifically here for what we try to do to optimize for cost, is that the world of NoSQL is transactional. It's event-based. It's clicks. Right? So I click to start, I click to stop, I browse the website, or I added something to my cart when I was shopping on Amazon or wherever. And the more I do that, more events are created. Those events have value, and they're used by other applications. So for example, when I'm selecting, go back to your streaming example, right? Your streaming example. So when I was exploring different things, that collection of information is great for me to go back and access, but it's also great for a personalization, for AI to try and figure out what kind of things I like, and then present them back to me as recommendations when new media comes out later, maybe out. So that data too accumulates in enormous proportions for personalization models to actually be built and run their models to produce recommendations. So for many reasons, there's an accumulation of data, and the storage cost is reduced by 60% when you move that data over to a infrequent table class. And the cool thing is that you can move back and forth. So if you weren't sure, you can go back. You can switch an existing table that you already have within an application to an infrequent access if you realize that maybe more than 50% of your cost, and that's usually a good indicator, more than 50% of your cost for that table is actually storage, that's a pretty good indication that you can save some money by switching it over. It's such a nice option to simply change the billing model for. And the important thing for me to mention is that it doesn't only reduce the cost of storage, it does have an impact on the cost of access. So storage cost goes down 60%, access cost goes up about 25%. But because you're rarely accessing that data, the less you're accessing that data, the more of that 60% savings that you can make. So it's up. That's why we say up to 60%.
Right. Yeah. Well, that does make sense, because it's very similar to what we see on S3. So when you have your different tiers of S3, again, guys, you've heard us talk about S3 a lot on this show. I'm trying to bring, especially like we said, DynamoDB might not be something that everybody uses as much as like S3. So relating it to that service, people might think, oh yeah, when it's like you're moving through the different tiers of S3, if you put it into a cheaper tier, it may cost you a fee to get out in early. So it's the same kind of premise, but you're having it at a lower one. So highlighting just the kind of two things that you said. So up to 60% saving, but 25% more on retrieval costs. So bear that in mind, guys. And then the other thing is if it's over 50% of your costs are on storage.
Yes.
I think that's a really useful indicator. And to shout out another thing that you guys have heard me talk about many a time is the well-architected labs query library. And so in there's a DynamoDB query. You can go and see how much you're spending. So action for today, if you want to go and see if this is a good use case, is to go check that out. And then we also spoke about when we wrote the blog part that there were two other things. So one was about archiving to S3. Do you want to bring so about another use case where you might want to use it?
So we talked about kind of different ways of knowing whether or not I have a DynamoDB table, or I have many tables, and I need to figure out, should I be using this new feature? And so we look at different indicators, and a couple of so the cost of the table is obviously, like you mentioned, is probably the primary one. Over 50% of the table cost is storage. But a lot of customers are implementing various mechanisms to move that data around in order to reduce its cost, because they are aware that it's less frequently accessed. So what we're seeing is some customers have built various ETLs or using the DynamoDB export to S3 feature that allows them to move some data out and then use the lower tier storage that you mentioned for S3, like Glacier, to put that data away. The problem there is that it's a little harder to access, right? And certainly cannot be accessed at the performance level, at the very low kind of single-digit millisecond performance that DynamoDB would offer. So another important point to mention is that if you have those ETLs, if you figured out a way to save money, now you no longer have to both maintain those processes or lose the performance, because with infrequent access table class, you get the same level of performance, same latency, same everything. You can use all DynamoDB features that you were used to in standard tables, but you also don't need to move data around. So if you figured it out and you're moving data out, that's a good indication that you probably want to bring it back in now that you can save that money and still access that data very, very quickly. Another important point actually to mention there is that this is yet one more reason for a lot of organizations that are looking to modernize applications and move to kind of microservices, serverless architectures to adopt DynamoDB, because now, even though it was better TCO before, now it's they have all these extra options. So now they can even save more money on massive storage when they move it over from relational databases to DynamoDB. A lot of it is older data, and they can move it directly into infrequent access table class. So another good reason to modernize with DynamoDB.
Yeah, that is. Oh, we've got a kind of question. It's not really a question, it's more of a statement. Here's an idea: auto switch mode to infrequent access based on usage patterns. So is there anything in the pipeline, I don't know if there will be, but anything that would also do this?
So the right answer is I don't know. This is obviously something that we do with other services, like S3 has intelligent tiering. So figuring out automatically where at which tier data should be and moving it there is a great option. It's something that we obviously have thought about, and I'll take this recommendation and turn it into into something of a plan, but I cannot tell you if or when it's actually going to happen. We are working on a lot of other things. By the way, on cost optimization, specifically, there are it's kind of a theme around DynamoDB. Again, because it's new and we realize that people don't know NoSQL that well, and in some cases, key value specific data modeling and so on. We're trying to add more features into DynamoDB that are TCO focused, that are reducing costs and optimizing costs for our customers. So there's other things that I think people will really like that are coming up soon in this coming year that are going to be just as exciting as infrequent access. And then we can get maybe to intelligent tiering as well.
Yeah. Well, watch the space, guys. We'll keep an eye out. We'll always share things that we hear about on the show. So maybe come back on for part 2 for the new announcements. So just before we jumped into that question, you were mentioning about people kind of moving over to DynamoDB from relational and wanting to be able to put data like straight into that storage class, which is great. But let's talk about a bit about migration. So how people can get started with moving. They've heard about Dynamo today. They get really excited. They want to go. What's their first step moving into it?
Yeah, so there is some exciting news coming up. It's not out there yet, but you know what? I'll give you an exclusive here. So we are working on Amazon DynamoDB migration program right now. It will package a number of services and best practices and hands-on technical assets, as well as developer education, so that people will feel more comfortable moving to DynamoDB. The first step within that program will be to engage with, and this is free of charge, engage with a specialist solution architect that would do a quick session and help you assess kind of, is DynamoDB, first of all, the big question, right? We want to make sure our customers have the right tools in their hands. So is DynamoDB the right solution, the right service for you to migrate to? What we're seeing is that a lot of companies that are migrating from relational databases, especially from relational databases to DynamoDB, do it for essentially one of 3 reasons, and sometimes all 3. The first one, we mentioned, DynamoDB is the fast one. So the first one is performance at scale. So customers that are using relational databases don't scale that great. They scale vertically. They add more cost as they scale. And when they hit performance limits, it's very noticeable. So DynamoDB keeps consistently high performance at any scale. So it's a great alternative. So that's number 1. Number 2 is modernizing applications. So a lot of customers or a lot of companies, organizations in public sector as well, are modernizing existing monolithic applications, breaking them up into smaller kind of microservices, and want to shift to serverless architecture, so they reduce their overheads. And DynamoDB is natively serverless, integrates with many other AWS serverless services, and it's ideal for those transactional microservices within the broader application scope. So that's another reason. And the third is moving to managed services. So DynamoDB is fully managed, which means you don't need to figure out, patch your database and deal with all that. We do it all for you in the back end, but it also comes fully loaded with lots of cool features. So standard IA, infrequent is one example, but point-in-time recovery is another example. Automated replication across regions is another example, both for disaster recovery and kind of global access. So it's the features, it's a fully managed service, it's application modernization, and first and foremost, performance at scale. For all those reasons, a lot of organizations are migrating from relational to Dynamo. And this new program, this new migration program, is going to make it a lot easier with services, funding, and education to make it really easy to take the step, save money, reduce overheads, and get the performance you need.
Nice. This just wins all round from here. So we've got 5 minutes left. I wanted to ask a question just so I know this. So you can buy reserved instances for Dynamo, right?
Yes.
How does that work with the infrequent access? Can it apply to those ones, or is it just a standard?
So infrequent access, so reserved instances for infrequent access is coming soon.
Okay, cool.
Yes, it's not there yet, but it's coming soon. We want to apply similar cost models across different options, certainly different table classes. With a standard table class, for a commitment, like a period of commitment, like a 1 year or a 3 year commitment to use the service, we are actually able to pass some of the cost benefits over to our customers. So there's an upfront payment component, there's a commitment, there's different factors. These are not so interesting. They're on the financial side of things, kind of how we figure out how we can actually create savings for our customers. But the reality is at AWS, we try as much as we can, and we've done so many times, move or pass those savings to our customers so that they can benefit from it. And so the RI is a great example, reserved instances or reserved capacity, where you basically say, I'm going to bulk reserve this much for this long. And as a result, AWS is going to be able to save money, and you can transfer some of that savings over to our customers. It's a very significant savings that could be up to about 70% savings. So it's
definitely.
very
And so on that, just wanted to touch on this before we finish. So when you buy your reservations, so I'm assuming that's for just your steady workloads, because there's also, you can do auto scaling with Dynamo, right? So there's a bit more flexibility. So do you want to just say a little bit about, just in the last 3 minutes, when you should buy an RI and how you can know what to cover?
When you should buy an RI, I would say that most companies start with on-demand access, meaning that they're allowing DynamoDB to fluctuate based on what they actually use. So you can use, there's no provision capacity as such, right?
Okay.
But once you actually know what your patterns are and how much capacity you're using, how many reads and writes you're actually using, you can set a bar and you have some history. And that bar, if it's reserved in advance, is going to be cost-wise much lower than provision capacity. So you have on-demand, provision capacity is going to be a lower cost, and reserved instance for provision capacity is going to be even lower cost. So the more you know about your access pattern or your capacity needs, the more you can make that investment and save.
Yeah, so great advice. I think it's the same for all services regardless, is look at your usage patterns, everyone. That is your homework for today. So thank you so much for joining. I'm just going to pop this up again. So if you want to note of the stuff that we spoke about, it's kind of summarized in this blog post here. So the putting AWS reInvent 2021 cost optimization announcements into practice. And that's it for today. So thank you so much for joining. Next week, we will have Biddle and John back on, that we've had on previously, talking about snapshots, so snapshots basics, and how you can optimize with those. So see you all next week.
Thank you.